Welcome to The Quiet Part Out Loud. I'm Nuvyn Peters, and I am delighted to be here with our esteemed guest today, the Honorable Rebecca Schulz, Minister of Environment and Protected Areas here in Alberta. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've known each other for a while, and you were high on my list of people to interview for this podcast because your journey has been and continues to be fascinating.
Well, thank you.
And I think people are really intrigued about your experience, your leadership, how you navigate what is a really complex area to be, particularly for a woman. And you do it with such grace and eloquence and charisma.
Oh, well, thank you. It's really nice that you describe it like that.
It probably doesn't feel that way every day.
No, politics sometimes feels like a pretty messy place, but I really appreciate that.
Well, you have the traits of the people that we need in politics because the world is a messy place and we need our leaders to help navigate through that with humility and humanity. And I love that you often refer to yourself as a compassionate conservative.
Yeah, I think when I decided to run for politics, it really was because I wanted, specifically as a conservative, I wanted to see more people like me making decisions that impact the province that we live in. Somebody who is just a hardworking person who represents working families and is in this because we want to serve our community and make our province a better place.
If you listen to this podcast, you know that we like to start with some fun questions. I think they're fun. So I'm curious. This is one that we ask all of our guests. In the movie of your life, what is the plot line? What's the big twist? Is it a rom-com? Is it an action movie? Is it a drama?
That's so funny because I was thinking about it and I've listened to every episode of your podcast and then I kind of forgot that you were going to ask me this question. But it would be something like a Reese Witherspoon. I was like, what's the movie where she's from a small town? She goes to the big city. It's Sweet Home Alabama. So maybe Sweet Home Alberta.
I love that.
Would be the name.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it would be a story of just a small town rural girl who has really big aspirations, works hard, shows grit and determination, and makes some brave and bold choices in her life.
I love that you've already thought of the title. We need to trademark Sweet Home Alberta. You heard it here first, starring Minister Schulz.
I mean, it would probably be some Paul Brandt songs, or Brett Kissel as the soundtrack. Yeah.
Okay.
We could make that happen.
I like it. Now, would Reese Witherspoon play you in the movie?
I mean, I love her. I absolutely love her. And I think she's about my height. That would be probably the key piece is finding somebody who is under 5'2" to play me.
Right.
Maybe Rachel McAdams.
I love it. It wouldn't be a straight to Netflix movie. It would be the big screen. So you began your career as a communications professional, earning your master's at Johns Hopkins. What drew you into public service?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always loved politics, even in university, in high school even. But when I was in university, I remember taking a few political studies classes and seeing all these people in the front row with their hands up. They knew all the answers. And I remember checking to say, did I miss a prerequisite or something? Like, how do all these people know so much about politics? Even Cold War, things before we were born. I've come to realize that sometimes the people who think they have all the answers in politics, I think that's more of a confidence thing. And so I kind of took the long way around. But I was working in Saskatchewan. I'm originally from Saskatchewan. And I was working for the natural gas company there, Sask Energy. And my boss had worked opposite of Premier Brad Wall's communications director. And so I was writing speeches for ministers. I was watching Question Period. I had this love of politics. And then one day a job came open and I asked him, how does somebody get one of those jobs? And then the very next day, he said, if you want that job, she will hire you. And so my first job in politics was working in the Premier's office, which I know maybe isn't normal, but it was a pretty amazing place to start your political career for somebody who was so inspiring for me, a leader who really just had a vision to make that province a better place and serve people. For him, it wasn't about leadership in and of itself. It was about serving your neighbors and having a goal to do that. And so I would say working for him was one of the things that inspired me to take that step and to eventually put my name on a ballot. And I also just think of seeing ministers that I had worked for delivering speeches, or specifically one who was talking to a grade 6 class about why he got into politics and the difference that one person can make. And that really is what drew me to public service.
And you kind of had this like mid-career pivot because we worked together at the University of Calgary, and then I felt like it was, you were on your maternity leave, and for me it came out of the blue. You're like, I'm going to go door knocking with my baby in tow. Talk to me about that decision.
Yeah, that was a little wild. I would say one of the biggest things, one of the biggest reasons why I think people don't decide to put their name on a ballot is probably fear of failure. When you think about failure, it's something that we do every single day. It doesn't matter what job you're in, right? We all make mistakes every single day. But when you're in public life and in politics, when you fail, it is typically very public, and it can be, you can fail very spectacularly in a very public way. Also, losing, that's not something that's not a story you want to tell. Nobody likes to lose. And so then to have that happen very publicly, I think is a deterrent. But for me, I really felt like with this new party at that time, the United Conservative Party was coming together. And I thought, if I want this new party to represent me, this is the time. This is the time to get involved. And being on maternity leave, I kind of thought, okay, what do I have to lose? Right? If I lose, I go back to a great job for a boss that I loved. And if I win, then I also get to do something that I think I'm really going to love.
And you took that risk and that leap of faith and had that confidence in yourself. And you must have had a lot of champions along the way.
Yeah, I would say my biggest champion is probably my husband. And I remember going to this event, and it was an event that was geared at getting women involved in politics. And I came home from that event. My daughter was 4 months old. And, sometimes when you have a young baby, you're emotional and you're exhausted. And I came home and I said to my husband, that's it. I can't do this. I haven't started. There are people who are already out there door knocking. I'm already behind. I don't even have a team. There's no way I can win. And he just kind of looked at me and said, I really don't think that was the point of that event, Rebecca. You can do this, right? Just because one candidate has been out there door knocking doesn't mean you're behind. And so I reached out to a couple of people who helped me decide where to run, where I had the best chances of winning. I'm a big proponent in making sure that you can run where you can win, especially for women, to run in winnable seats and winnable ridings. And at that time, I had no team. But my husband would come home from work every single day. And again, I had a 4-month-old and a 3-year-old. And this was for the nomination, so the mini election to get your name on the ballot for your party. And he would just say, you can do this. Get out there and door knock. And I had no way to say no because there was no other option. So I went and I door knocked by myself every single day for probably 6 weeks until I even had my first volunteer. But my family was so supportive. I had a group of girlfriends that I asked, should I do this? Can you help me? And so they would come out and door knock with me too. And it was a small but mighty group of supporters. But what I lacked in terms of a team, I made up just by sheer determination and hard work.
There's no way around that, right? It's at the end of the day, it's that determination and hard work and confidence, dedication. And so how has that continued to motivate you throughout your various roles, like your portfolios, the work that you're doing in the community?
Yeah. I tell people all the time, there's really no secret formula to getting elected. It really is hard work. You put in the time, you door knock, you connect with people, you listen to people and show them that you care. The same thing then, after being elected and being into new roles as a minister, sometimes in areas that maybe you're not as experienced in, it's do the work. Learn, meet with people, meet with the department, understand what, I find the best way to learn a new file is understand what frustrations people have with your file, and then you can start problem solving. But there really is no replacement for just putting in the time, being prepared, showing up for meetings prepared, and getting out there and talking to people.
Yeah. So we call this podcast The Quiet Part Out Loud because we really want to provide people with an opportunity to say the things that they're thinking in their head that they have yet to say out loud. And they're kind of wondering, am I the only one who's thinking this? What are those moments for you?
I mean, I don't I'm an extrovert, so I don't have a lot of moments that don't make it out loud.
There are no quiet parts.
I don't have a lot of quiet parts. And so, of course, though, I would say in our role, right before you go into media, before you do an interview, there is a lot of prep and a lot of practice. But I always still think that there is a benefit to being honest with people. Whether I go back to when I was door knocking for the very first time in 2019, and I had constituents saying, Rebecca, we need you to balance the budget. And I would say, absolutely, we're going to work towards that. But please also know that means there's going to be decisions we make that you don't like. And I will still show up and hear your concerns and knock on your door and not be afraid to do that. Same thing in meetings, right? Tell people what you're thinking. Show them the direction you're going. And I think it helps people feel like they're involved in the decisions that you're making, the direction that you're going. And I think it helps make better policy at the end of the day.
Right. One thing that's been on my mind when I have watched your journey is just the fact that our politicians live so much of their lives on social media. You're needing to connect with people, and people feel like if they voted for you or if they didn't vote for you, they own you, and they feel like it's their right to attack, criticize, comment on everything that you say or do or didn't say or didn't do. How do you handle that?
I would say you're right. A lot of that, it is worse online. I think when people are behind a screen or just behind a keyboard, it's really easy to criticize. And oftentimes, it's not criticisms of policy or ideas, which I think is frustrating. I think that's fair game. We should have vigorous discussions about policy and government direction and ideas at a big picture level. But oftentimes it is very personal attacks about, and especially towards women and conservative women, about your intelligence or your integrity or your hair or your makeup or your weight. And those are the things that I think deter a lot of women from getting into politics. I remember, there's two stories that I would tell you that kind of summarize this. The first was door knocking. And it took me a long time to be able to tell this story because I was just so embarrassed. And now I tell it all the time because I want people to know what my experience was. But I was door knocking again in the nomination. I had this probably 4 or 5 month old baby at that point. And I had a man open his door and he looked at me and he's like, "So how long are you going to be able to do this job?" I was like, excuse me? What do you mean? At first I didn't quite understand what he was saying. And as he looked me up and down, it came to me. I had just had a baby, but he thought I was about to have one. And so it was mortifying. I had one volunteer with me, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to say here? And so I just decided, I'm going to make this guy say it. I said, "I'm sorry, sir, I don't know what you mean." And he goes, "Well, And I said, I do have a baby. I have 2 young children, but I'm going to do this job just as well as any other man who is elected to the legislature." And same thing online. There was a time when somebody had said something quite mean to me on Twitter. It was pretty early on. I was the Minister of Children's Services. It was a pretty personal attack. And I said that to my husband. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe what this person said about me." And he said, "If that's going to hurt your feelings, you're probably in the wrong line of work." And I know that doesn't sound maybe super empathetic, but my husband and I met in politics, and he is 100% right. That, somebody on Twitter making a criticism of me, it's not typically about me. There's something else. That person maybe just doesn't like my party or the politics, or maybe they're just having a really bad day. But ultimately, I can't let those types of things bother me.
Yeah. It must be hard, though. I mean, when I think about even just being open, people needing to be open to feedback, constructive criticism, but you live in this world where society feels they can, tear down a politician online. And that must be still raw.
Yeah, it does get pretty personal sometimes. And I even think back, there was somebody in the legislature actually, and we're in question period and emotion runs high. And it was actually complete and utter misinformation. But I remember one of the MLAs on the opposition side looking at me and heckling and saying, "You're disgusting. This is disgusting." And I thought, but it's not even true. And so I was pretty new at the time. And now, those types of things, They do kind of roll off my back, but they are definitely a deterrent to getting more women involved in politics. And I often think, if you wouldn't be proud of your behavior, if your grandma was watching, or, I think of my daughter who's now 7, don't act like that. Don't behave in that way, right?
There is always a movement of like, we need to get more women in politics. But when I look at the lives of our politicians and how they're treated online, I think to myself, I wouldn't encourage anyone to go into politics. It's a rough place. You're at that tip of the spear of people who are supporting you, championing you, but people who feel that they can criticize every move you make. So how do we change that so that as strong women, we are encouraged to go into this profession?
Well, I think, first of all, it's just treat people the way that you would want to be treated. I mean, even for me, early on, it was easy to get caught up in debate, right? And you're debating with somebody and it gets really passionate. I remember seeing a clip of me online and I thought, I didn't really love that either, right? If you're, in a debate and you're matching their tone and behavior. And so I always think, first, I'm going to treat people the way that I want to be treated, but then call out that type of behavior as well, right? It's totally unacceptable. And I think by telling people about the experiences that we face, it makes people think twice maybe about making those types of comments. But, I would also just say that, yeah, there's that negative side, but on the flip side, it's an amazing opportunity. Like, I get to take people's frustrations or their aspirations and hopes for what our province is and what our province can be, and actually do something about it, fix problems, and, ideally make Alberta an even better place than it already is for today, but for my kids so that they can stay here and build a life here and go to school here and grow their families here.
Right. I love that mindset. How do you seize those frustrations, but also those hopes and opportunities and channel that in a way that actually makes this the best place to live?
Absolutely. And every job has pros and cons or challenges and really amazing opportunities, but I just think, you know, coming into this with a public service mindset, like I am really just here to serve my neighbors and my community and make this a better place. It's all very worth it and it's so exceptionally fulfilling.
Yeah. Leadership lessons along the way. What were some of those moments when, undoubtedly you would have had to make some really difficult decisions and hard choices and then communicate that to stakeholders, to voters, um to residents in our province. Walk me through some of those experiences for you.
Yeah, I would say maybe two that are somewhat linked is one, being afraid to make mistakes. Obviously, that was, one of the things I thought about when I was even deciding to run. The fear of failure is very real. But I think it's important in these roles. People are looking for leadership and they want people who are willing to tackle the big challenges that we're facing. And so that means thinking big and not always being afraid to make a mistake, but being okay to say, if I made a mistake, we can fix that and just be open and honest and then take that and move on. The other thing would just be taking risks. I think sometimes, and whether you're in politics or in the business world, you can be so focused on finding career stability and predictability. Especially I think a lot of young people now are coming out of university and affordability concerns. They just want to find that job, that stable job, and there is a fear of taking risks. If I was afraid to take risks, I would have missed so many amazing opportunities. Even just taking on this role in environment, it is challenging. Every day, there are multiple different challenges that I face and problems we're trying to solve, from species at risk to water. But I think just knowing who's in your corner and being okay to take risks, that's one of the really important lessons I've learned along the way for sure.
Taking risks is a really big one, regardless of whether you're in politics or you're trying to figure out your next career move. Do you think it's more pronounced for women?
I think it is. I think, and I think sometimes too, Ronna Ambrose used to say it takes women 3 to 7 times to be asked before they will actually consider putting their name on a ballot. The same thing is true, and I've heard you say that, and I've heard you say it on this podcast. I think that, when women go to apply for a job, they will focus on the 3 or 4 things that they haven't done, or, oh, it's asking for 10 years of experience. I only have 5 or 7. I think the focus is, a little bit more. You have to focus on the things that you do have and what you have to offer and be confident in that. And so I think sometimes that's a deterrent to women taking risks. And then I think that limits their career growth. And unfortunately, I also think it's true that sometimes you have to move on to move up.
What you just said really resonated with me. Sometimes you have to move on to move up. And I think it's important to think about the people in your corner that are cheering you on and championing you at every step in in the comfort that you need to feel confident in taking those risks and those next steps.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I was watching your discussion with Heather Colbert, and it's always the balance of not being too impatient and trying to move on too fast to really enjoy and learn from the experiences that you're in. But there is also sometimes the value in I think practically speaking, or from a confidence perspective, or from an experience perspective, moving on to move up. Um, it gives you also just more insight into the things that you don't know or didn't know you didn't know.
Right. Yeah. And thinking about also different cultures, like work cultures that you thrive in. And I feel like I'm still learning so much about, under what professional conditions am I able to bring my best self to the role? What teams, what skill sets, what complements, what you bring. What would you say it is about your team? Like, what's your power alley? And you're like, this is what I do really well, and I need to surround myself with people that complement that skill.
Politics is not like any other workplace. So I will start by saying that
Okay.
it is very just it's unpredictable. It's high pressure. It's really fast paced, and things can change on a dime. And so what I look for in a team, in politics, I think loyalty matters and hard work matters. The rest, I think you can coach along the way, but you need to know that the people that you are with every single day are going to have your back and willing to work hard. I think you know this about me. I also know this about you. I think we have this in common. Patience is not something I was blessed with. My grandma always said it was a virtue that was missed when I was made. Yes. But you know what? I had a chief of staff once early on, and I know I have a tendency to want to fix all of the problems, and I would like to fix them yesterday if we could. And I have very high expectations. And at first I felt bad about that, I was nervous to be asking too much of people. And my chief of staff said to me, Minister, she said, when the public is unhappy with the decision we make as a government, they're not coming after, public servant number 682. Your name is on the door. This is you. You are responsible for this decision and the outcomes. And so it's okay that you have high standards. And ultimately, I think Albertans do have high expectations of their elected officials. And I think that that's a good thing. It keeps us moving. It keeps us motivated to fix problems that we see. But I also think you just have to have a little fun along the way. And so that's true whether it's in my office or on the political campaign team side, whether it comes to fundraising and events. It's a lot of hard work, but you also have to make sure that you're having fun and that you're surrounded by people who also want to see you succeed.
Yeah. What excites you? Like, what gets you really passionate about, this is why I'm doing this job?
I think there are two things, and they're very different. One, I love the public speaking aspect. I love being able to speak to people and have them come up and say, I really believe in your vision. I appreciate what you're doing. That to me is so fun. And I say this as somebody who used to write speeches for politicians, and now my poor team, I sometimes just write my own. So I love that part, but I also really love the policy piece where you're presented with a challenge and it's like a puzzle where you're taking apart legislation, policy, factors like the federal government or municipal governments, and then trying to put them back together in a way, certainly in environment, you're trying to balance the growth of communities, the growth of all of our major industries, the economics of projects, and stewarding our environment for generations to come. And those are not easy challenges to solve, but that is what I love about this job.
I'm glad that that makes you happy in this role because that's really hard. I was just reflecting on how would I balance all four of those, aspects, even within that one portfolio, ensuring that you're keeping kind of a goal in mind and an outcome in mind that both is engages your stakeholders and helps move our province forward. Um, you're a communicator by profession, and from being a speechwriter to working at the University of Calgary on the communications and marketing team, how has your communication style changed now in politics?
I think um, probably at the beginning, I was a lot more scripted. And I think it's come with confidence, but also with experience that I just have more conviction in terms of what I know Albertans want to see, what our government and our team and our premier, and ultimately, me as a minister serving in that government, I have conviction in the direction that we're going, the decisions that we're making. And so now my communication style has just gotten a lot more personal, I think would be the big change.
And when you're reflecting on your day, probably exhausted, I can only imagine, what keeps you up at night?
Oh my gosh, I used to joke that caribou keep me up at night because land use planning is a very big challenge right now, which is, kind of a joke, but it also is a big challenge when we're trying to manage again. We want to double our energy production to meet global demand. We want to protect very sensitive species here in Alberta and make sure that we're respecting Indigenous land use, and making sure that people have jobs and livelihoods. And so that is an interesting challenge. But I actually sleep pretty well at night, but it is probably because by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. But I do have this, I can't even help myself. I just have this desire to fix all of the problems all of the time. And so I've learned to kind of compartmentalize the things I control, the things I influence, and the things that I have neither control or influence over. And so ultimately, though, I would say time management is something that's really important in a job like this and in any leadership role, really, is making sure that you're delivering, that you have time in your schedule to think and to be strategic and to learn, and then also time with your family and time to recharge.
Time management is so important. And I think also as are boundaries. So, how do you set up boundaries where you preserve that limited time that you have throughout the day?
That's a tough one, I think. And certainly in these roles, sometimes you have all of these people managing your calendars. You have, certainly in this full file, there are so many people who want to meet with us, lots of public events, lots of things in the evenings and weekends. And it's never a good feeling to say no to people, certainly not for me. But I have really learned that in order for me to do my best and to show up at my best in this job, I have to prioritize my family. And so when I make decisions, is this necessary for me to do for my ministry work? But also, is this relevant to my constituents? We don't get to do the work. I don't get to do the work as the Minister of the Environment unless the amazing people in Calgary-Shaw elect me to represent them. So I try to prioritize things that are happening in my riding, connecting with constituents. Then it's the work that I do with the department. And then I also just make sure that I'm really kind of choosy about what I do on evenings and weekends, because after this is all said and done, the people who are still going to be there for me are my family and friends.
Yeah. And you've got two amazing kids. How do you explain your role to them?
I spend a lot of time talking to my kids about why I do this and making sure that they know that I'm grateful for their sacrifice. So we try to take them up to the legislature a couple of times every session, especially in the spring. I mean, I'm up in Edmonton from Monday morning until Thursday night, most weeks from the end of February to May long weekend, give or take. And so to have my kids up there to see what I do and then make sure that they know, I really appreciate the fact that mommy gets to do what she loves for all of the people who live in Alberta, and I couldn't do that without you. And so sometimes it's tough for me to be away. I'm lucky to have a great team that at the beginning I thought, I have to be there in person for everything all the time. And my team our caucus team is so family first that if there is a piano recital or a hockey tournament, um, somebody's always willing to have your back. I mean, there's a couple of things that we miss too, but that's just like any other parent, right? But we spend a lot of time talking to our kids about politics and public service and knowing that they play a role in this too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important for our kids to understand the roles that as professional women we have, in that it provides them with opportunities to learn about the world around them, to experience different things. I often find myself telling my kids that's why mommy does what she does.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen your kids at a variety of community events. And I think it's important for them to know, whether it's, for me, it's whether it's politics or volunteering or community service. I want my kids to know that serving your community is really important, that trying to make this place better than how you found it is important, and that it doesn't happen by accident, and that any great things in this life will require some trade-off and some sacrifice. And so making them part of it, whether that's community events or talking to them about some of the trade-offs that we have to make, I think it's really important for them to grow up and want to be just good citizens and good people.
I'm so tired of feeling guilty all the time for having a fucking job and providing for my kids. It's like, this is why mommy works, so that you can ride a horse.
Yeah. I still think back anytime somebody asks me about this or anytime I'm feeling guilty, you'll remember this because it was at the university when I was working in alumni, and Dawn Farrell told the story about, being in the Dairy Queen drive-thru and thinking she needed to quit because she couldn't balance all of this. And her daughter said, "Mommy, you can't quit. You're like Mulan."
I know.
Like, I want my I think about the moment I decided to run for politics, and I looked at my daughter's beautiful face. You've heard this story a bazillion times, but she was sitting on the floor. She was 4 months old, and I thought, what is the story I want to tell her? That I really wanted to do politics, but I was afraid, ultimately afraid of failing, or that I wanted to run for politics and I put my name on a ballot and did something brave. Win or lose, I did something brave. And I thought about, what is the story I want to tell her? And that was the story I wanted to tell her, that, whatever you want to do in this life, take the risk. Just do it.
It was so awesome to have you here today to have this discussion. I'm really grateful for your perspective and your insight. Before we close, what's some advice that you have for either people that are considering going into politics? What's some wisdom or some tidbits that you would share with them, or advice that maybe you wished you had?
Yeah. I think the best thing that somebody ever said to me when I was thinking about putting my name on a ballot, I was very fortunate to have people like Ronna Ambrose and Brad Wall that I could talk to. And when I raised that with the former Premier Brad Wall, I said I was thinking about running for politics. And he said, quit thinking, just do it. So that would be my advice, is quit thinking, just do it. And it gets easier and easier to take those risks and to put yourself out there. I think back 2 years ago, when there was a leadership race in the United Conservative Party. If somebody would have told me in 2019, when I was running to be an MLA, that I was going to decide to put my name forward to be the leader of our party, I would never have believed that in a million years. But I felt compelled that, what I had to offer, I wasn't seeing at the time, and that I really felt strongly that I had to put my name forward in that. And so it gets easier and easier to take those risks and to put yourself out there.
Well, thank you for continuing to put yourself out there, and we are grateful for your service to our province. And thanks for being with us here today, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.